unenjoying your work.
Yeah.
All right,
Deborah.
we should be good to go.
Excellent. Then good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. It is a little after 5:45. Just wrapped up a good meeting with the county commissioners and carrying on with this afternoon's work session, and agenda item number 2. And that will be the establishing fees for paper water bills and paper tax or fee filing. And I see Leslie's here and Hillary, and Leslie, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am excited to open up a conversation regarding the town's paper water bills and our paper tax filings that we currently have in the town. So for a while, we've had the option for people to take care of these online, whether it's receiving their water bill electronically or to file for their taxes or fees online through Express Bill Pay. This is something that I have experience with in the past, is implementing fees for both of these programs. And I have found previously that they can have a great success rate, upwards of 90+% participation, which would be an improvement upon the participation that we currently have. So Hillary and I are both here to answer questions. We did refer to what other municipalities are doing in this space for both options. And it does align with the strategic plan in sustainability as well as quality core services.
Questions, thoughts, staff on the first one? I would say that kept coming up for me only because I'm living it right now, but how with your experience when implementing this in Breck or from other conversations, how for like the technologically struggling folks, how big of a barrier is this? Do we see any inequity issues with like, I think of like my in-laws and the computer, and setting up this system could be a pretty huge issue.
And we would offer as town staff the ability to walk someone through that over the phone and to be able to show them that. And so I feel like from experience that works pretty well. Additionally, for anybody who doesn't sign up right away, we would be happy to waive any fees that they might have incurred already in order to, encourage them to sign up going forward. So we would have lots of patience and expertise made amongst staff to assist anybody who needs that.
There be a possibility of any exemptions for some folks who really just don't have the ability to do it online, whether they don't have computers?
Experience, I haven't found the need to offer exemptions, but we can certainly, make space available for somebody to be able to use a computer. It also does work on a smartphone. And like I said, just lots of patience in walking people through getting signed up for the paperless process. And they are welcome to still pay by paper. We are not proposing a fee based upon how you pay, just based upon how you receive the bill. And in my experience, while there is a perception that not everybody is online, most people do have an email. So
What bills, what's the cycle that we're talking about? Meaning,
So water bills are quarterly, and the sales tax and paper bag fees are mostly monthly, but there are some people that have other, like a quarterly or potentially even an annual filing.
but for a resident,
So for water bills, quarterly.
so we're really just talking about $20 a year. If you choose to not do this as a resident.
And, from my experience, once you do get participation and you get more people that sign on, the cost per bill actually does increase because you start to experience a certain level of overhead. So I would like to leave the possibility open, perhaps in the future, that, as we get participation, in order to get the higher percentage, that fee that's associated could potentially increase.
And is there a chance, this is workshop, so this is just a thought. Can we use the carrot instead of the stick and give people a credit of $5 for signing up, as opposed to a penalty for not signing up, and then everybody feels good about what they've done? And this
Sure.
comes from, I've been hit with these bank charges, and they really tick me off. And then I go and I do subscribe. So I accomplished the intended goal.
There was one example in here. Gunnison actually offered a one-time bill credit of $15 for signing up for paperless statements. I don't know if that's as much of an incentive, but
If we can explore doing it the friendlier way, like I said, using the carrot instead of the stick.
Do we know the value of each paper one going out? Like what's it costing us for staff time and all that?
did start to dig into that. We think at this time that $5 is probably an appropriate amount when you're associating, a fee with what it's actually costing.
Right. So when you have to file it all and everything, it's essentially taking that $5. They're gonna pay for that service is basically where this is coming from then,
Correct.
right? In order to force them to go online
Correct.
and foregoing online.
Too, I think I like Andrew's approach, though, incentivizing it instead of,
Like, it's a bad feeling when you have to pay a bill to begin with. I would love it to be online, but I like his approach of.
What's our percent now of people who pay online or paperless?
Let's see. So that was, do you remember that, Hillary?
I'm
I think
sorry.
it's
I read the report more than 20 minutes ago, so I don't remember if it was there.
What's a race?
Because I'll argue against my thought, which is if you penalize, you're only penalizing those who are still in. If you're incentivizing everybody who's already done it. I realize that's.
I apologize. I thought we had included that in the memo, but I'm not seeing it, but it was less than 50% of participation in the water billing for sure.
Be wrong about this, that currently paying for your water bill online, you do have to pay a fee,
So if you pay online, we do not charge you a fee.
and there never has been? I shouldn't say never.
Know
never,
of?
Long time.
So I've been here since
Not
October, but
recently. Okay.
Remember paying, and I think I started as soon as that was an option for ours.
we do not want to charge anyone a fee for paying
Yeah,
online.
no.
Yeah, I think there are other organizations that might charge a credit card processing fee or that type of thing, but we have steered clear of that.
Okay.
Honestly. Even if we incentivize first and then penalize. Like implement, and again, whoa, speaking from above,
Yeah.
technologically, I don't know what I'm imposing on you, so. If that technologically doesn't work, then let's not even, dismiss it, but.
So to give someone the credit for signing up, that would be a manual process. If we were giving them a one-time credit for signing up. Or were you proposing a monthly?
Thinking, we'll give you $15 to go to sign. If you already are, congratulations, here's $15. Thank you for what you've done. If you sign up, we'll give you $15, but starting January 1st, we're gonna charge. Here's,
Double, yeah.
Oh. So we are
At of just over 30% of our water billing customers are online right now.
How many total customers?
1,000, oh wait, hang on, that,
Stealing water. That's it.
Thousand
Yeah.
customers?
yeah, it's a little over 2,000.
And, just, so we're talking about two different things here. One is the online filing of sales tax. The other one is the water bills. And just as a reminder, well, I guess it would be up to you where that credit would come out of, but normally the water billing would be related to the water fund. So I don't know if you're proposing that credit would come from the water fund.
assume that's where all the billing expenses are and all that, so.
I know I should know this, but I can't think. There's the option, people can drop off their bills in the box in the foyer, right?
Yes, so they could continue to do that. If
Yep.
they received their bill online, they could continue to leave a check in the foyer.
Use the post office if people are willing to be that brave.
Sure, my experience.
So is once people sign up for online statements, they do generally pay online. So I think we'll see that correlation even without adding an additional fee based upon payment type.
I'm kind of, I think council, I'm kind of intrigued by Andy's idea and kind of starting with the carrot and put a timeline on it and see how many we can get and give people the chance and then set a date where saying, you know, we tried, we wanted you to do this for all the reasons it meets our, so especially the sustainability goals. And I hate to ever add to your plates of having to do a manual credit. And I don't know if there's a better way we could find a solution to that would be easier, but I think incentivize and then roll it out. Cause I think the long-term goal is I fully agree with, I fully agree with doing it now, but I don't disagree with the incentive part to start and see if we can get people to do it.
What does that put on staff?
A lot of manual.
So I can't think of how to do that other than a manual credit once they sign up.
How many, how many approximately are signing up per day? One.
They,
not a week,
No one's seen.
no,
one a month, you know.
yeah.
An auto pay option.
Yes. So once you sign up for the paperless billing, you also have the option to set up auto pay, which from my experience, most people do
Boom.
choose that option.
Yeah, like
I did also want to add, you know, we actually weren't proposing, if you were to adopt an ordinance that it would necessarily be effective immediately.
Mm.
We did want to leave a long period, for communication to let people know that this is coming. It would give them the chance to be notified on 2 separate utility bills. In addition to, letting our sales tax filers know with, a long period of communication as well.
mm, what about, I know it sounds silly. Sometimes I forget to pay my bills if they're not on an auto pay, but it's online. Was there like a reminder option or or is there like, I don't know.
I think you should get an
Yeah, so
email, right?
So if you sign up for the paperless statements, that gets emailed to you. And then additionally, if you sign up for the auto pay, then you don't have to remember anything.
Cool.
And you-
Except
and you
to have
get an
money in
auto
your
pay,
account.
You get the bill and then you get the auto pay notice when it's been
Awesome.
submitted.
Cool.
I don't know if this is an appropriate question or not. Does the incentive have to come from the water company?
Or the water fund.
So it could come from the general fund instead.
But it's a little convoluted, pulling money for paying Peter,
Right.
taking from.
Yeah, I was
April.
just wondering if instead of like a credit, maybe, you know, I don't know, gift cards or some other kind of incentive. I don't know.
I don't want to lay too much extra, difficulty on you guys.
Yeah.
that way. Just with the idea of subtraction, because, we can't just add without taking away from what else has to happen. With that, I'm probably for just what you're proposing with the $5 there for myself. That's where I stand.
With a two billing cycles to give warning and information and get the word out and.
Yeah.
Plenty of lead time. I think I fall kind of in line with Andy on that. I like the idea of the incentive. I just think the logistics and implementation and how many people are gonna probably capture.
Yeah.
Limited and.
It's a lot of work for
Yeah.
limited result.
So 2 billing cycles, 6 months, basically.
Not months. Makes a difference. That's why I just wanted to confirm, we're just talking about quarterly bills.
Yep.
So we're talking about quarterly water bills and we're also separately talking about, it could be a different amount, sales tax and bag fee filings.
That just depends on the cycle those particular businesses are on.
We do find that with businesses generally, they are easier to adopt. They run a business, are more familiar with online processes. So I think that is less intensive on education than the water billing aspect.
Sorry. For a business, we're not sending them a bag fee bill, or we're not sending them a,
Go online and they print it out and then they can mail it into us
they
instead
can
of
go
using our
online.
online filing option.
okay.
Yes. They have two online filing options. They can actually file directly with the town of Frisco on Express Bill Pay. They can also file through the sales and use tax system with the state.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Yep.
Plenty of
Yeah.
flag on this one.
That's kind of recommended. We'll follow staff recommendations in the memo and yeah, lots of lead time and maybe I guess the timing wouldn't work to get announcements out of town cleanup day on the 4th since we won't
We
We won't
won't have it.
this officially by then, so, yeah. But if we've got 6 months, maybe we can utilize some of the concerts in the park to help anybody and maybe have something set up where we could bring somebody over with a
Sure.
computer and.
Yeah, we could have some tablets.
Yeah, and walk them through it, or yeah. Do we still have all those old tablets from when we did community surveys?
I was not involved in those tablets.
Okay, we can, I think it's just an opportunity we should use if we can, just to get the word out. Be great, so.
Great.
Okay, so we'll come back to you with an ordinance. Thank you.
so much. Appreciate it. I didn't even look on the computer. I figured you would have spoken up if you needed, yeah?
I would have, yeah. Thanks you guys
Okay.
for,
I'm trying, just jump in if I ever. Next item on the work session this afternoon is agenda item number 3, the part that probably why everyone is here this afternoon, and this is the council orientation on quasi judicial decision-making. We're going to cover Open Records Act in another meeting. And I'll.
You are entirely too kind.
Did that for. Highlight of the evening.
Passing out a paper memo. I know that Rick and Jesse have received copies of this memo or something very substantially similar to it in the past. I'm happy to give them another copy by email if they want to raise their hand. This is the third in what will ultimately be 4 distinct legal training sessions. This one is about quasi judicial decision making and ex parte communications. But before I get into it, I sort of want to talk big picture, right? And go back to like middle school civics class. And tell you that, you know, from a legal standpoint, everything that this council does can be categorized into one of 3 categories of action, right? You may be acting in a legislative capacity. Easy enough, right? You're making laws. Pretty easy to figure out when you're in a legislative capacity. You're making rules of general applicability. You might be acting in a ministerial capacity. You're buying and selling property. You're approving budgets. You're approving contracts for the expenditure of money for this, that, or the other thing. It's not legislative. You're not making any laws. You're just running the city. You're engaging in ministerial acts. And then finally, the third category, if you're not doing one of those first 2, you are engaged in a quasi judicial proceeding. What that means is, as I said, you know, when you're working in a legislative capacity, you're adopting rules of general applicability. When you're in a ministerial capacity, you're acting like a manager. When you're in a judicial capacity, you're acting like a judge, right? Your job, your role, and at this point is the application of existing legal standards to a particular property or an application to use property in a way that will affect that property and no others, right? You are literally examining facts, an application. It could be a plat, it could be a wide variety of things, but you're examining facts and you're determining whether those facts meet the requirements or limitations of the code for whatever decision it is that you're going to make, right? That is a quasi judicial decision. As I said, you're almost always, except when you're adopting revisions to the land use code, you're almost always going to be acting in a quasi judicial capacity when you're dealing with land use. So if you're considering a subdivision application, a rezoning application, a development application, any site specific application that involves presenting the town with facts so it can determine whether those facts meet the requirements of the code and result in an approval or denial, you're quasi judicial. from a legal standpoint, the primary difference between quasi judicial decision and a legislative decision is the standard under which a court will review that decision for its propriety, right? When you are acting in a legislative capacity, your discretion is very broad, right? Unless we are dealing with constitutional issues, right? Or unless we're implicating freedom of speech or gun control. There's a hot topic lately, right? Constitutional protections. Unless you're dealing with one of those areas, all you need, a legislative body, to adopt a law is a rational basis, right? Some reason, and you don't even have to express that reason, right? They'll leave it to the town attorneys of the world to argue what the reasons were in your head at the time, right? And they'll let us come up with any rational basis whatsoever to justify that legislative action. Things get stricter when you're dealing in a legislative capacity with constitutional rights, and there you're going to be subject to either intermediate or strict scrutiny. You may have heard those terms before, and it's just those are just ways of describing the standards that a court will apply to a given legislative action and deciding whether it's okay. If you are dealing with a fundamental constitutional right, like a law that would impact First Amendment speech rights, the standard is that the government is to have a compelling state interest, is to be addressing a compelling state interest and using the least restrictive means possible to do it, right? So the standards by which a legislative action will be judged vary depending on the subject of the legislative action. Not true with a quasi-judicial decision, okay? A quasi-judicial decision will not be looked at for rationality. It will be looked at for whether it meets the standard of being not arbitrary and capricious. That is a standard set up actually under a court rule. There isn't a statute about this. This is Rule 106A4 of the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure, say that anybody who is aggrieved by the action of a lower tribunal, that's you guys, can seek an order of a court that the particular action was ultra vires or arbitrary and capricious. So what does arbitrary and capricious mean? Again, it's a pretty low standard. A decision is not arbitrary and capricious. They state it in the negative in the cases. And what they say is that a decision of a quasi-judicial decision maker is not arbitrary and capricious if it is supported by competent evidence on the record. Not very helpful, right? What's competent evidence on the record? Well, it is not a preponderance. It is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not substantial evidence, right? You don't have to have 51% of the evidence mitigating in favor of one conclusion, right, to decide that way. You have to have competent evidence on the record, and how the courts have defined what is competent evidence, how much is enough. They've said that you have competent evidence on the record if the facts on the record for or against a particular decision are such as may be fairly debated between reasonable people. It's not a very high standard, right? You can have 10 nuns on the one side of the proposition and one convict on the other. And if the convict has presented you with rational bases, right, that could lead to a debate between reasonable people about the evidence presented by the nuns in comparison, you're free to go with the convict, right? It's not I'm exaggerating, but it's not a preponderance of the evidence. It's not a credibility. It's not the number of people who testify. Is there enough evidence on the record to make the issue at hand fairly debatable among reasonable people? So I would suggest to you that is not a terribly high standard, but it is a standard that requires that the town build a record in support of its decisions. The reason I say that is because to be upheld on an appeal, a quasi-judicial decision must express its findings of fact as they relate to the criteria or standards for the decision. So let me tell you how this goes, right? I've had the joyous occasion to represent municipalities in defending 106A4 actions. The very first thing you do is spend the first couple of months certifying the record. That means we take the recordings and we get transcripts and we get a verbatim record of everything everyone said in that proceeding. We then gather every single document that formed a part of the record in that proceeding. And we put it all together in a nice big package and we send it to the other side and see if they have any objections, things that they want to add that they think were part of the record, or things that they want to subtract that they think were not part of the record. But ultimately, that is what goes to the court. And then the parties have essentially an opportunity for an opening brief. The plaintiff makes an opening brief. The town typically would make a response. The plaintiff has the last words. But I mean, you talk about boring briefs, right? It's 20 pages of, here is criteria number 1. Here is every instance in the record of this proceeding in which a piece of evidence was presented that was relevant to criteria number 1, or in which any member of the decision-making body spoke to criteria number 1. And then you proceed to criteria number 2, and then number 3, right? And obviously you're trying to show the court there is competent evidence on the record. Yes, there may have been facts in opposition, but these facts are such that reasonable people can debate about them, and accordingly you should defer to the council's decision, and courts will if they find it. In making quasi-judicial decisions, decision makers are expected to take on the role of a judge. As I've said, you should really picture yourself back there in a big black robe and the white curly wig and all of that. The courts analogize to judicial rules of conduct when they are examining legislative bodies acting in a judicial capacity. And before I go on and tell you what they're going to expect of that, let's go back to middle school civics class, right? Remember, we separate the legislative power from the judicial power, right? Because as a general proposition in this country, we don't believe that the people who make the laws are very well suited to be the ones who decide whether they are being followed or not, right? Too much baggage, right? Too much legislative, too much policy baggage comes along with being, that's the thought anyways, with being a legislature, to put those two functions in one body. But here you go, right? So, and because municipalities have put themselves in that position by making laws over the years. So the courts have had to come up with ways, they're reluctant to say, no, you can't make these kind of decisions. You'll just have to have people come to court or that kind of thing. They understand the administrative state and applications and the like, but they do expect you to act like judges. They expect you to come to the decision-making process without any bias as to the outcome of the proceeding. They expect you to make your decision based only on the evidence presented to you in the hearings held concerning the matter. The reason for the rules of bias is that constitutional due process requires an unbiased decision maker, right? You're not giving due process if judges have predetermined notions of how this will come out. Constitutional due process requires that the party to a proceeding, whether they're an applicant or a neighbor, has to have the opportunity to rebut or otherwise respond to whatever arguments may be made to the decision maker concerning the matter at issue. The second reason for bias is that because a court in reviewing quasi-judicial decision has to determine whether the decision is supported by competent evidence on the record, the court expects that all matters that were considered in making the decision be part of the record. In other words, if you are displaying a fact, right, that wasn't brought to you, you may well be displaying a bias, right, a prejudged notion about what you came to decide. This all, and I'm happy to take any questions, please feel free. This leads us to ex parte communication. One of the most significant rules that the courts put on your role as judges is that you are not to engage in ex parte communications. And ex parte communication is defined as any communication made to a decision maker by a party to the decision. Read party broadly. Anybody who's entitled to speak at the public hearing is a party to decision. Communication made to a decision maker by a party to the decision about the subject of the decision outside of the hearing, public hearing being held, is an ex parte communication. Ex parte communications are not in and of themselves illegal or unethical. In fact, sometimes you can't do much to avoid them. But they are unfair to anyone who is not a party to them, and they can also adversely affect the result that the decision-making body seeks to ensure. And interestingly, they can affect the result adversely to the person who's making the ex parte communication, right? The typical example I give is you are stuck in the grocery store line and guess who pulls up behind you, right? The developer, maybe it's a neighbor to the project, whoever it may be, is a party to the decision. They know a hearing has been set. You're going to make a decision on this development application, and they really want you to know how they feel about it. In that situation, my advice is that you firmly, politely, but firmly tell them that as a decision maker, you can't hear anything from anybody about this decision outside of the hearing. And while you very much want to hear from them, if they can't make it to the hearing, please send your comments in writing to whoever the staff member involved. Usually it's going to be Don Reimer or a planner or the like, and assure them that their comments will be included in the record as part of the staff memo. If that doesn't work and they keep talking, you might move on to say, hey, if you keep talking to me, I am going to have to, at the hearing, disclose the fact that you made this communication, and I'm going to have to tell everyone what it is that you told me, because if I don't do that, the very decision you seek to have made is subject to challenge as being a result of an unconstitutionally biased process, because there was there was evidence being considered that wasn't in the room that the other side did not have a chance to respond to. So that's the basic rule and reasoning behind ex parte communications. Covered what I've got. I'm happy to take questions from you on any part of this.
But I think the important part too is whenever we're in this situation to make quasi judicial decisions, it will be clear, and Thad will and myself will make sure that they don't sneak up on us. They will be
Absolutely.
obvious and clear based on the wording in the packet, and eventually, like every liquor license and everything else, they're quick to realize what we're doing and when we're
Yes.
not in that role.
It is very, very, very highly likely that anytime that you are engaged in a quasi judicial decision, you will have a staff recommendation that includes findings. It's important that if you don't agree with those findings, that's fine, but let's talk about changing them. Or let's assume a situation where staff is recommending approval, and after your hearing and hearing from everyone, you are inclined to deny the application. If there is any chance at all for a legal challenge to that denial, my recommendation is that you recess the hearing, give me instructions to come back at the next meeting with a resolution of denial in this case, and some findings to support it. Because if we just try and move forward on the fly, coming up with the findings that support the decision, we're asking for it, right? Based on what I've told you about how it is that these decisions get challenged and the fine tooth comb that you go through of all of the criteria and the evidence. And it's commonly done. Right? If you're going to go against the staff recommendation, you don't have findings prepared, recess it, send me away. We'll come back and we'll finish it next time. That's it.
Questions? You know, good lawyer questions.
Some that need to be addressed now.
Good. With that, we'll have a little extra time, and we will reconvene at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Wow. Yeah.
Okay, so they're in break. So it'll begin again at 7 o'clock, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully we had a good, really past few days. 7 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting for the Frisco Town Council. Can I have the roll call, please?
Certainly, Mortensen.
Here.
Aaronson.
Here.
Burley, absent, Held.
Here.
Incan.
Here.
Blanca.
Here.
Skritzback, Adrian.
Here.
Next up this evening is public comment. Anyone wishing to do so, make public comment can do so now. Please be topic specific for anything that is not on this evening's agenda. Please state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. If you are online, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and I will call on you. Open up for public comment. Seeing no public comment online and no public comment in chambers, I will now close public comment and open up for mayor and staff comment or council comment, excuse me. Moving right along, any staff updates that weren't in the packet? Nope, okay, thank you. Next item up will be the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved to approve the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Aronson. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Aaronson.
Yes.
Burley, absent, Held. Incan.
Yes.
Blanca.
Yes.
Skritzback, Adrian.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up is new business, and this is agenda item number 1, and this is a contract with Interstate Parking Company for parking management services. I'll open up the public hearing and turn it over to staff and welcome back. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. We are here this evening to review the contract with Interstate Parking. Just kind of a recap, during the May 10th work session, staff reviewed the public comments received and presented some options for council's consideration. Council supported a 3-year contract with Interstate Parking Company to manage paid parking at the Frisco Bay Marina from Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day weekend and to enforce parking year-round on Main Street. So just a few highlights of the contract. 3-year term, 50-50 revenue split. During at least the first operating year, looking at unlimited season passes be available for $99 per pass. Passes would be on sale until June 30th. We're looking at year-round enforcement on Main Street. This enforcement will cost $1,149 per month from November through March. The enforcement, there won't be a cost during the summer. It'll be included with the paid parking at the marina. There will be no Main Street enforcement during the months of April and October. Paid parking at the marina and enforcement on Main Street will start June 10th. Interstate will provide the following equipment, including the cost of installation. We'll have wayfinding, pricing, and other parking related signage, license plate recognition software, including handhelds and portable printers, the Tap and Explore app, a Park Frisco Marina vehicle, like a patrol vehicle, tailored website, 5 solar powered payment kiosks. Should the town terminate the agreement with Interstate before the end of the 3-year term, the town will owe Interstate $75,000 for their capital investment. During the first summer, as the program is implemented, Interstate will be able to provide in-depth data and analytics to help the town plan future rates, pass sales, and better understand the current user groups that are parking at the marina. The terms of the contract for years 2 and 3 may change based on this analysis. And then we can hold a work session with council in the fall to review those numbers and see how that first summer went. So any questions this evening? Diane, myself, and Gareth from Interstate Parking is here to help answer any questions. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions? Questions, I will open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this agenda item, we do so now. If you're online, you can mute yourself, raise your hand. I'll call on you. The additional. Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment at this time. I'm back to council discussion. Thank you for taking all of the public feedback, and I think the process has been a good one to get to a good place to start, and looking forward to rolling this out.
I'd just like to add a little, we personally, I feel that we've done a pretty diligent job in listening to everyone. I think we've come to a reasonable decision at unlimited passes for $99. This is all not just off the cuff. We've been working on this for a long time. And so I think we're in a reasonable place, and I think the reflection of nobody standing up in opposition tonight is evidence of that. Thanks.
Perhaps a motion to approve the contract services.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve agenda item number 1, contract with Interstate Parking Company for parking management services.
It's been moved to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Incan. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Councilmember Malenko. Thank you. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, can you call the question, please?
Burley, absent, Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Palenko,
Yes.
Skritzpack, Adrian,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the work and
Yes, sir.
looking forward to the information we get from all the data. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Next item under new business for this evening is agenda item number 2. This is first reading ordinance 22-06, an ordinance amending chapter 171 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco, Colorado concerning water by amending section 171-11 concerning water rates and charges to allow for reduced water rates for out-of-town properties that are deed restricted for affordable or workforce housing, and by amending section 171-14 concerning the inspection and testing of backflow prevention devices to establish reporting deadline for annual testing and mandatory minimum fines for violations of testing and reporting requirements. I will now open up public hearing. Over to Don and Jeff.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and thank you for that introduction, Mr. Mayor. I think you covered it. There's actually 2 parts to this. This is a 2 amendments to chapter 171 of the code, which is primarily related to water. I'll handle the first part and then turn it over to Public Works Director Jeff Goebel for the second part, which is backflow prevention related. So if you recall, back at the April 12th meeting, there was a discussion about a request from a property owner who was entering into a deed restriction as part of the Housing Helps program to apply for and receive in-town water rates as part of the incentive and a benefit for entering into this deed restriction. As part of that, the town council did give direction that yes, as long as there's not it's a reduction to the in-town water rates, not below that, we could go ahead and draft this ordinance. So this ordinance and this amendment before you would do that. And so in the event that a property owner who currently is a property owner that's on town water that wanted to enter voluntarily into a deed restriction for workforce housing, petition town council to have a reduction to in-town rates, that could be now considered by town council as under this ordinance. Town council is under no obligation to go ahead and make that approval, but each would be on a case-by-case basis. So this isn't an automatic occurrence. So I can take questions on that now, and that might be the easiest way to go, and then turn it over to Jeff for the backflow prevention.
Yes, that.
I've got a couple of minor points on this. As written, this does not allow for discretion. As written, if it is in existence on the state, it's tapped into the town system and provides affordable workforce housing, it gets the in-town rate. If there's discretion desired, I can write that discretion in, but I will need some input as to what the criteria would be for making that decision. So as written, it is automatic. Also as written, and this is my error, I did not limit it to those existing homes that also have a water tap into the town system as of July 1, 2022. If that is the desire, that is an easy couple of words to add for second reading. Don and I had a discussion about it earlier today, in which
follow
we
up.
played
Yep.
devil's advocate with each other and ultimately decided that we could argue it either way. And I'm happy to chat with you about it.
Other specific questions around this part of this agenda item?
More comments.
Yeah, we'll hold off the comments and see. If there's no questions, then obviously we can keep having questions. I'll probably just open up for 2 public comments. John, yeah, for your set, just in case to keep, that's where we're at. I'll open up for public comment at this time. You wish to make public comment, may do so now. Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment on this station and back to council conversation and discussion. And I think that was my thought, as well as what was Dad's clarification, is if we wanted this to be tied to existing taps, because that's water that we're already providing and accounting for. And if they're willing to go into a deed restriction, I think it would be great to then honor that and provide in-town rates. And then the thought and the conversation I had with Thad was, if it's not for existing taps, it's just anybody who enters into that deed restriction, what would that look like? And I think that if you can,
Well, it would look like,
by that
it would
point,
be the same decision that the council currently has to make when it decides whether to provide water service outside of town. It is discretionary on the part of the council. It can be conditioned. And among other things, the code contemplates is the possibility of a provision of cash in lieu of water rights, right? And nobody would really expect a single family residence to come with its little bitty portion of a water right, but we can value that, and the code does allow a requirement of cash in lieu of a water right. So what that would look like is 2 separate and distinct decisions. The first being about whether to let a particular property out of town property onto the system. And then if that property were to provide a affordable housing or workforce housing deed restriction as currently written, it would automatically get the in-town rate. So there'd be 2, right? There'd be a decision point as to whether you wanted anybody even to be in the system to take advantage of this provision. Bill's right after our discussion.
I would be in favor of allowing that as even part of the workforce housing overlay, which, you know, hopefully we can compile all this information as what's available as being in the workforce housing overlay. But if they're going to provide deed restricted, I'm for that, even outside.
we wouldn't have any say in that because it'd be outside the town code, so that the workforce housing overlay wouldn't relate to this, unfortunately. So I like the thought. Another arrow in the quiver, but yeah, I think it's, for me, and hearing that and hearing Thad's response, I'm good if that we don't add in the specific language around existing taps. If we know that those, they're already there, they can come to us under this wording, and anybody who's adding an additional tap to the system will have to first go through the requesting water process. I'm comfortable with that. Those layers. Any other?
I'm curious with the first point that you brought up, that the wording does not now make it conditional,
Doesn't make it discretionary.
discretionary. What would be a reason for denying it? If we
can't
were to make,
think of one offhand.
okay.
So.
Okay.
It's not good enough.
I wouldn't want to live there.
It's not a lot.
And with that, I think we'll bring Mr. Goldwell up and all of these at once.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The second part of this ordinance change is to help the water department enforce the backflow prevention rules that have been put down by the state health department that the town is required to enforce. We've had backflow prevention rules for many years now. The problem that we're having is the state is now, for lack of a better term, enforcing it. Okay, I mean, they've always enforced it, but now they're really enforcing it. And part of what they're enforcing is our compliance rate at the end of each year. We need to be at 95% compliance of testing these testable devices. And basically a backflow device is a device that prevents water from the building getting back into the distribution system and possibly contaminating it. Excuse me. So the way we're set up now is we don't have a deadline for buildings and building owners to send us a report that their device was tested and it passed. They just have to send it to us sometime within the year. So what we're finding is that they're waiting until the very last minute to get these tested, and then we're not getting the reports until the following year, which push us into a violation with the state. So what we're trying to do is create a deadline, and that deadline is what we're asking for is September 1st of each year for every device that is on a domestic water system or on a fire suppression system, so that we can get that report and have the time that we need to compile our report and get it to the state so that we remain in compliance. Then we're also asking for a different date for irrigation system backflow devices, because those are usually tested earlier in the year when the systems come up after they've been shut off all winter long. And we would really like to get those reports and know that those backflow preventers are safe as soon as possible after they get started up. So that's the difference, why we're asking for difference of dates here. This will really help the town come into compliance each year when we have to report January 2nd of every year to the state that, yes, we are at 95% testing compliance. Here's all of our records. We're good to go. And also in that respect, we've really never had a fine for people that didn't do it. So we've come up with a way that we need to come up with a fine, which Thad and I discussed this, and we started out at $500 first offense. And, you know, we kind of want to be a little bit nicer than that and go down to $250 for first offense if you don't report by the deadline. We, of course, will work with property owners to make sure if we get it on September 3rd or 4th, you know, I mean, we're not going to be heavy-handed with this, but we need that tool so that we can maintain compliance with the state health department, because the state health department, if we're out of compliance with them, they have the ability to fine the town up to $1,000 a day for every day that we are out of compliance, which they haven't done. I mean, they've done it to other systems. I've seen it, but we haven't done it to us, but they can. So we want to make sure that we're doing a better job of compelling property owners to get us these reports. And it would be $250 for the first instance of violation. And then that violation is a daily violation while we wait. So Thad, correct me if I'm wrong, but so the first day, let's say September 2nd, we don't get a report, they would be issued a citation by the police department and have to go to court. It's a mandatory fine of $250. Now, if we didn't get the report the next day, we can cite them for $500 because that would be the second offense. So each day that we did not get the report is a separate and distinct offense, if you will, that a citation could be written for. Now, again, we're not going to be unreasonable with this. We're just trying to gain compliance of property owners so that we can maintain our own compliance. Now, these devices are not devices that are on private residences. Private residences do not have testable devices. They have to be devices that can be tested, which is large buildings, condos, multifamily units, office buildings, fire suppression, restaurants, things like that, industrial uses of the water, where we don't want that water coming back into the distribution system and possibly getting many people sick. So that's kind of what this is. I know it's just trying to help us stay in compliance with the state, because so far we haven't, because we're not getting the reports in a timely fashion. And in some cases, we're having people not doing any testing at all, which is what we're really trying to That's what really matters is we need these things tested to know that they're safe.
I just wanted to add on to Jeff's comments. The final sentence about each state during a failure to test, inspect, submit a report continues, shall be considered a separate and distinct violation. It's nothing but redundancy. That's the case with every violation of every provision of the municipal code under a general penalty provision, right? The reason it was put in here is the same reason that we're proposing mandatory minimum fines. The intention is that the water department is going to send out a letter. And they're going to let everybody know, we've recently amended our code. And here's we won't describe it this way, but here's the scary new language that you need to be aware of as you do your planning for testing and submitting reports this year. And really, that's the intent of it. Give people attention.
Do we know how many people are compliant at this point and how far away from 95%?
Last year, we were at 89%, almost 90% compliant. But we were compliant with testing. We were not compliant with reporting because we didn't get those reports in a timely fashion to present to the state.
Right.
So testing was compliant, reporting was not, if that makes sense.
How many, if you were at 90%, how many big buildings is that did not comply?
90% is approximately 800 devices.
Right.
Because you have to consider every irrigation tap, every fire sprinkler tap, and every domestic water tap of a larger multifamily commercial establishment.
Yeah.
And in cases like Whole Foods, where they have testable devices on their sprayers, on the vegetables, I mean, all of those have to be tested and reported. So the number is rather large, and it's very difficult for us to scramble at the end of the year to gather all this information up and get it to the state before we are out of compliance.
Yeah.
What do you think's like the biggest reason why people are slow getting?
Money.
Yeah.
It costs money to do the test, and a test can run from $100, $200, $300. And then if the device fails a test, you could get up into thousands of dollars for repair or replacement. And I mean, even the town, our devices, every irrigation device, all of our stuff is tested as well. So those are all in the mix. And we have a company do it because while we have, including myself, we have certified backflow testers on staff, we're not allowed to test our own devices. That would be a conflict of interest, and the state doesn't like to see that. So, so we contracted out too. And it's really about money, and quite frankly, people forget and they don't know. So that's why there'll also be an educational piece to this. We'll send a nice letter out, as soon as this ordinance, if it passes and it goes into effect, and we'll send the letters out to all water customers and let them know that this is coming down the road, and we'll work with them. The first year here, we're not gonna, we're not gonna be heavy handed. We just need to get compliance, and we need the time in the water department to get all that information together and then be in compliance with the state.
Does everybody who needs a backflow testing device, are they registered with the town as having one? How do you know who to
Yes,
send the notices
we've
to?
done surveys over the last several years where we've gone into almost every building and looked to see, yes, you have a testable device, you need to be reporting, or no, you don't have a testable device, but it needs to be testable, so you need to replace it. And we've come across that a couple of times very recently where some fire sprinkler systems are put in so long ago, this requirement was not there. So, they were kind of grandfathered in until they do a remodel or something like that, where they have to, anytime they change the fire suppression system, they have to upgrade to a testable device. And we've come across that a couple of times recently.
The state health department has imposed this whole backflow regulation scheme in a very incremental way.
Yep.
And it started years ago, and the initial requirement from the state was simply, you're going to adopt an ordinance that will require people to fill out a survey that we're gonna send you to query about whether you have these devices. Awful for you to fail to fill out the survey and return it. So it was very step by step and incremental in terms of what the requirements from the state health department have been. But now they're kind of getting to the point where they're done with increments and they're gonna start finding.
Now it's time to,
Be there and do it. In what, 5-6 year period we're talking about?
yeah, I think it's even a little bit longer than that, I
Time
think it's
flies,
getting
yeah.
closer to 8 to 10 years from the original
Yeah.
law, yeah. It's been, yeah, trust me.
Yeah, the testing, is this something like any local plumber who
No,
has a
you have to
certification?
Be a certified tester, you have to go to a 40-hour training class.
Okay.
All of our water department individuals have done that, including myself. I did years ago, but and we have to renew them every year by testing. So there are companies, fire sprinkler companies have testers on them. Irrigation companies have testers on board. And then there's companies out there that actually, that's all they do. And the guy that we use, I can't remember I think it's Rocky Mountain Backflow. That's all he does is test backflows. And he tests all the town's backflows. So, and we will provide a list. In this letter, we can't recommend anybody, we can't approve anybody. All we can do is supply a list of these are the licensed testers that are in the area. Feel free to call any of them.
That's
yeah.
where I was going. So I
Oh, no,
appreciate
we'll have an education. Well, we've done it before. I mean, we've sent out a couple letters in the past several years trying to get people going, but now we're at the stage, okay, you've had time. Let's really get this going. And it's all about protecting public health when it comes down to it.
questions. Anyone wishing to make public comment on this portion of the agenda item? I do so now. Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment and back to council discussion. There's a motion. Seems like both worthy things.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't have that. Okay, now, Mr. Mayor. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 2. Do you at least want a first reading of ordinance 2206?
Sure. Been moved to approve agenda item number 2 by Councilmember Held. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Aronson. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, can you call the question, please?
Held,
Yes.
Incan,
Yes.
Malenko,
Yes.
Skritzpack, Adrian,
Yes.
Wortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley, absent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
Next item is old business, and this is the second reading of ordinance 22-05 and ordinance amending chapter 167 of the Code of Ordinances of the Town of Frisco, Colorado concerning vehicles and traffic by amending section 167-11 concerning traffic control devices and by amending various other provisions of the adopted modal traffic code to facilitate the enforcement of parking regulations by contracted parking enforcement operator. Open the public hearing, turn it over to Thad. I believe this one is you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance has not changed from first reading, where I believe it was approved by all members present, if not all members. I can't recall if we had an absence at the last meeting. It does, as the title suggests, it makes very technical changes to the model traffic code previously adopted by the town that are necessary to authorize a third party, a non-governmental official, a non-police department officer to enforce the provisions of our plan. They don't have to take part.
Questions? Anyone wishing to make public comment on this agenda item may do so now. Seeing no public comment. Close public comment and back to council discussion or a motion. He's agendaless.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the second reading of ordinance 22-05
Move to approve on second reading ordinance 22-05 by Councilmember Held. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Seconded by Scripsack. Adrian, is there a discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Incan,
Yes.
Yes.
Scripsack, Adrian.
Yes.
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley, absent, held.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on this evening's agenda is an executive session.
Would you like me to
Please,
make
that would be
that?
great with
Yep.
the amended.
Yes, there is we have a typo.
Yes, I'm aware of the typo.
All right, okay.
I am. Yeah, very
Ready.
good.
I coached him through it. We'll see how he does.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve enter into executive session CRS 24-6-402 (4) conferences with an attorney for the town.
No, okay, for the purpose of the following discussions. No, you want to.
Okay, that's all right.
failed you, Andy.
Number one, the potential acquisition of affordable housing or affordable housing covenants in connection with the potential redevelopment of the real property located at 20 East Main Street and known as the Frisco Prime property. Number two, the potential leasing to others for cellular communications tower purposes of a portion of the real property owned by the town located at 102 School Road, Frisco, Colorado 80443, and known as the Public Work Facility. And number three, the potential acquisition of real property located at 810 Pitkin Alley and legally described as Block 1 Bills Ranch Re-Sub L1 Sub.
And moved to enter into executive session. Councilmember Held, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Linko. Discussion on the motion. None, can you call the question, please?
Malenko. Yes. Scripsack, Adrian.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley. Absent, held.
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Thank you. And it will be just a moment for me to switch over to the other Zoom for the recording.
5-minute break while we wait for that to happen.
And we're not waiting till 9 o'clock to do this.
Oh, yeah, sorry, man, we'll wait. Yeah, we're going. We're rolling.
Are we good?
Yeah.
We don't have the people. who
I know,
are
that's,
necessarily.
do we know?
Dawn, is that on the phone?
I was gonna say, yeah, okay, that's fine. We can, I think we could bounce around too, if they're not here and ready, we don't have to do them in order.
Yeah.
And I took a photo of